church benches and into the trenches. Let's make a righteous ruckus.
Hey, welcome back to the Righteous Ruckus podcast. I'm once again your host, Riley Lowe, here today on this it's actually, I know it's August, but this is a beautiful summer day in Oklahoma. Usually we're battling triple digits, and this actually is a very, very nice day. Of course, the locusts or cicadas or whatever you call them, they are out and about this evening, but it's nonetheless a beautiful, beautiful evening. I'm going to title this episode, Why Me? Why Me? It's somewhat rhetorical, somewhat of an open question as well. I think the application may kind of surprise you, in my life anyway, but I understand why people do say, when they're in dire straits, when they're in rough times. I mean, I'm not going to say the thought doesn't cross my mind, because it does. But why me, God? Why me? I'm going to kind of spin it in a different way today, though, so be sure and follow all the way to get the full context there. But why me? It came to me this week, actually, when a coworker I was just making small talk, and this coworker, admitted some serious things that were going on in their life with one of their relatives, and it had, it involved drinking and driving and the consequences thereof and everything. And I was able to share with them some of my experience, because I've been there, right? I've been there. 13 years ago, I was hit head on by a drunk driver. I've covered this story plenty of times on this podcast. If you haven't seen it, it's basically a miracle happened in my life. Even though everybody that I know that I would approach with that story, with that testimony of my wreck, is what I call it, just the wreck testimony, would say that is an awful, awful thing. Over these last 13 years, I've been able to use it for good, to allow it. Let me rephrase that. I haven't been able to use it for good. God has been able to use that wreck testimony for good numerous times. And just the other day was one of those times. I was able to pray with this coworker, and they said, thank you so much. That's what they needed. They needed to hear that somebody else has been through this kind of thing. They're not alone. And an offer, the praying, an offer of hope. There's some hope in this situation. I was able to offer a little bit of that. But why me? You may be thinking, Riley, that applies to that wreck. It applies to the times you've had these infections, this struggles along the way after the wreck, the cancer that was just a few years ago now. In 2022, Christmas of 2022 is when I had my cancer. The opportunity has been there numerous times in my life to say, why? Why me, God? Why me? Like I mentioned before, it really hit me. I did it before in the wreck deal and multiple times, but it really hit me. I was able to put words to it when I had the cancer, because it was not, why me, God? But it's happened enough times. This was not my first rodeo. It was with cancer, but not with the, critical circumstances, that I was able to just say, how, God? How can you use this to glorify you? Because I know some way, somehow, it's going to be used to glorify God. How is this going to be used to glorify you, God? And ironically, that leads me right back to why. You say, what do you mean by that, Riley? Well, most people, or many people, including myself, will hit the valley in life, the struggles in life. And like I said before, the thought will cross my mind, why God, why me? As in, why does this happen to me? I'm able to shift that to how. The reality is it has happened. You know, I've heard it said that when something bad happens, you can get better or you can get bitter. You can get better or you can get bitter. Which one are you going to choose? Because you can get bitter at God and sit there and drown in self-pity, or you can get better and start working that direction. The realization that I had during that wreck, and that I've had multiple times, you know, throughout my trials in my life, is, okay, I'm here. I can't go back in time and change leading up to this, but I can choose how I move going forward. I can choose my path forward from here, my way out of this, my way forward. I can choose to rely on God, to hold on to God, to draw closer to God, or I can choose to move away from God and handle things my own way. Fortunately, for the vast majority of the very critical things in my life, the deep, deep valleys, the dark, dark valleys, I've been a saved man by the grace of God, and I'm able to draw close to God and close to my faith, and that's what helps pull me through this, through these times. I know people get through these situations without God, but I don't know how they get through without God, and I can only surmise that it's more of an empty victory, if you will, because you're trying to do it all yourself. How hard? So when you get through that time, are you able to boast about it and say, I pulled myself up, believed in myself enough and got through it? I'll tell you what, I'm not strong enough for that. That's why I need God. I'm not strong enough to do that on my own. I need to cry out to God to get me through the tough times, because I can't do it on my own. Yeah, I have a wonderful wife. I have a great family. But a lot of times things are beyond human understanding, right? I believe it's in Isaiah somewhere. It says, His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. His ways are higher than our ways. We can't understand the goodness in it all. Even the possibility of goodness. Like I said, you go from why me, God, I'm in this awful situation, to how are you going to use this situation to glorify you, God? And that leads me back to why me? Why me, God? As in, why would the God of the universe choose to use a lowly sinner like me? Why does the God that created everything that you see around you choose to use the things He created that are imperfect, that oftentimes turn against Him, that have done so many things in their lives that they're ashamed of, they deserve eternity in hell for? Why? Why use those kind of people? Why use me? Why am I the choice of the eternal God to do this podcast, to spread the word to people, to witness to people through my actions and through when I work and all that? Why pick me? I'm wholly undeserving of the honor of even trying to do this. But yet, God uses us. God uses us. I want to read a few scriptures that kind of express this point, help drive this point home. The first is John 14:26. This is Jesus speaking, telling his disciples, "But the Helper, the Holy Spirit," some translations say the Advocate, "whom the Father will send in my name, he will teach you all things and bring to your remembrance all things that I said to you." The Holy Spirit, once you receive justification, the Holy Spirit indwells you. And in many situations, like the other day, for example, I've had several situations. I remember before I ever had this happen to me, you think, what does it feel like to have the Holy Spirit tugging at you, pushing you to speak to someone, pushing you in a certain direction? What does that feel like? It's indescribable. It's a burden, almost a burning. This is my experience. It's like a burning in my heart. I knew the other day, as soon as I started speaking with this coworker, as soon as they started speaking, this is before I knew anything that was going on, I felt it was like a bubbling up, and it was not indigestion. It was like a bubbling up inside my chest, combined with my head. I guess you could, that's really, I guess, now that I even say that, biblical time, that's kind of the description of the heart, is this whole area of my body was saying, you need to pray for her. It was not audible, but it was an unquenchable urge, an unquenchable fire inside my chest was saying, you need to pray for her. And then, and my mind tries to shut it down a little bit, go, I'm at work, I'm doing this. My flesh, that's a better way to put it, my flesh battles this. But it's unquenchable, it's unstoppable. Could I shut it up? Yeah, I've done it 1,000 times before. And each time I go away kicking myself because I did not give in to the will of the Father. The Holy Spirit, I can't describe it. It's just a pulling. It feels like my heart's going to come out of my chest, like somebody has reached in there and grabbed it and is pulling me in a certain direction. And it's far better, in my experience, to give in and to follow that urge of the Holy Spirit than to withdraw from that or try to quench it, try to sear it, try to subdue it. It's far better to give into it. The second verse I want to talk about is in Isaiah 6:8. Also I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Then I said, here am I, send me. Now you could say, oh, well, there's no other people there with Isaiah. So of course he's saying that. You have to bear in mind, he just got done saying exactly what I've kind of covered in this. In Isaiah 6:5, he said, so I said, woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. And shortly after that, when they said, who shall I send, and who will go for us? Then I said, here am I, send me. That sticks in my mind and comes to mind quite a bit when I'm in those circumstances and I feel the Holy Spirit tugging, it's like, okay, here I am, God. Send me. Send me, God. Isaiah just got done saying he is wholly inadequate for the task. But then when God asks him and he hears that, who shall we send? He gives it up. He says, all right, God, here I am. Send me. Because as my pastor has said on multiple occasions, he recounts the time when he was called to preach. And he was kind of wrestling with it, and his wife told him, the safest place to be is in God's will. And that's very true. That's very true. The last verse I want to cover on this podcast, Romans 1:16 and 17. For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God to salvation for everyone who believes, for the Jew first and also for the Greek. For in the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, they shall live by faith. We are called to be like that. We are called to be not ashamed of the gospel. Have I been ashamed of the gospel? Yes. I'm ashamed to say that. I'm not proud to say that. There have been countless times in my life where I encounter someone put in a circumstance that I know I should have done more. I know I should have gave in to the pulling of the Holy Spirit. Now, I will tell you this. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. Because you see how God is able to work through you in the people around you. And you just, it makes you want to crave more of that. So I want to say, why me? Why me, God? How can you use this circumstance, God? And then why am I worthy of being used? But the reality is, perhaps you were created for such a time as this. Imagine making an impact in somebody's life because you gave in to the Holy Spirit. And you get to heaven and you're hearing, well done, thy good and faithful servant. You step into heaven and here you are, being greeted by people saying, man, I'm glad you took the time to speak to me that day. It changed my life. Man, I'm glad you took the time to speak to me that day and tell me a little bit of your testimony. That led me in a direction that eventually led me to Christ. And that's why I'm here. Hopefully, this podcast, leads somebody to Christ. Hopefully, this podcast encourages you to get out of your comfort zone and trust and lean on God and lead somebody to Christ or lead them in the right direction that they can get there. That's my hope and that's my prayer. Why me? Well, because God has chosen to use me. Just like Isaiah said, here I am, send me. I don't know what all that's going to entail. It's definitely not a boring life. Always something going on. But I encourage you to ask that question. Why me, God? And follow it up directly with, how can you use me, God? Have a blessed day.